The views and opinions expressed in The Fact Is with Hollis Grant are those of Hollis Grant and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Droids Canada Network. Droids Canada Network does not take responsibility for any content or position produced by Hollis Grant and his show. Listener discretion is advised.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you for tuning in to another edition of The Fact Is. And on today's episode, we're talking about guns. We're talking about guns in Canada. And unlike our neighbors to the south that do have the Second Amendment that allows citizens, individuals, to own firearms and to protect themselves. And it's a constitutional right to have a gun and to own a gun. And that is your right as a citizen. If you want to have one, you can have one, and no government can take it away. However, in Canada, there is no Second Amendment. Guns are controlled by government. And in recent years, there's been a lot of talks of shootings and mass shootings. And when there's mass shootings anywhere in the world, all eyes go on to America. So a school shooting in America is a big deal in Canada because politicians will use that and say, well, it happened there. And it can happen here. So we need to restrict guns. We need to make sure to keep people safe. Now, there's a lot of safety checks. I do believe in screening. So if you're going to own a firearm, maybe you shouldn't go out and buy one and get it that minute without any type of training. These guns today are a lot different than guns in the 1700s and 1776. Muskets, flintlock muskets. That weren't very accurate. And part of the dueling process of two gentlemen getting together over a duel, most of the times you wouldn't even get hit because the accuracy on these unbored barrels, the musket would just shoot out and go whatever way. And in fact, if you take a look at those muskets, the brown vest muskets, the ones that the English used, and it would have been common in the Revolutionary War. You could stand a good distance from a barn and stand there all day and not even hit the same spot. And that's all day shooting because there was no accuracy. Once they started rifling the barrels, then you started seeing more accuracy. You saw a better accuracy in the American Civil War, and then from there, guns really changed. So we're not talking about the same gun, and I know that the law is very different in that. A gun is a gun, but perhaps a little bit of safety training would go a long way. A little bit of showing a little respect for these weapons, and especially the ammunition that goes along. There's conversation to be had, but to say that you can't have a gun, I don't agree with that. I think gun safety is the way to go. However, Canada, we're looking at, and politicians look at, well, we have to stop this. We have to protect the citizens. And it's coming from a perspective of we must save the populace from themselves. We are the protectors. And this is where the liberal mindset in this Canadian government is. We're going to take a look at this Communist Broadcasting Corporation news, so the CBC News. And this is back from December 5th. So, it's December 5th of 2022. How Bill C-21 turned from banning handguns to hunting guns. The government's latest amendment would ban, and did ban, many hunting rifles, shotguns, and even antique cannons. Confusion was on the agenda at the Parliamentary Committee last week after the Liberal government brought in last-minute amendments to its contentious gun control legislation. The proposed changes to Bill C-21 were tacked on by Liberal MP Paul Chang after it passed second reading, drawing complaints from opposition MPs who accused the government of sneaking in changes that would expand the scope of prohibited weapons to include hunting rifles. The amendment adds long guns to the banned list in 4 different ways. First, it has a clause that would effectively ban any rifle or shotgun that could potentially accept the magazine with more than 5 rounds, whether or not it actually has such a magazine. Critics say that includes many rifles designed for hunters, not soldiers. The list also names guns that fell afoul of 2 rules. nominally intended to ban powerful military weapons such as 50 caliber sniper rifles and mortars. One rule bans long guns that can generate more than 10,000 joules of energy, and the other bans guns with a muzzle wider than 20 millimeters. Critics say those rules would ban everything from antique blunderbusses to the 9 o'clock gun at Vancouver's Stanley Park. Lastly, the amendment prohibits by name a large number of semi-automatic firearms that do not have detachable magazines and don't meet the definition of a quote-unquote assault-style firearm, or infringe the other two rules, but which the government wants to ban anyway. They include a number of long guns in wide use by Canadian hunters. The Communist Broadcasting Corporation News asked to speak with Paul Chang about the amendments, but was told he was traveling and unavailable. Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino insisted that the hunters are not being targeted. We have a plan to eradicate gun violence once and for all, Mendicino told the House of Commons on Friday. We are not going to target those guns which are used conventionally for hunting. So to go back to what he said, we have a plan to eradicate gun violence once and for all. And this is what it is. It's eradicating gun violence. Now, let's fast forward a few days. And the article goes on to talk about other guns that are, being banned. But let's focus in on that, the plan to eradicate gun violence once and for all. So the Liberal plan is to end gun violence. Now, on December 18th, 2022, remember that article is December 5th. The law came into effect since then. On December 18th, 2022, a mass shooting occurred at the Ballerina Residence condominium tower in Vaughan, a suburb of North Toronto, Ontario. 6 people were killed, including the gunman, a 73-year-old Francesco Villi, who was shot and killed by the responding police officers. Another person was hospitalized with serious but non-life-threatening injuries. Officers responded to a report of an active shooting at an apartment building in Vaughan around 7:20 p.m. Upon arrival, they discovered multiple victims. The building, known as the Ballerina Residence, is located at 9235 Jane Street. The victims were found on several floors in the building after the gunman appeared to target 3 separate units. The gunman was located on a separate floor from the victims. And the gunman, Francesco Villi, was identified as a resident of the building and was reported to have used a semi-automatic handgun. Now remember, these guns are apparently banned. Police identified the gunman as 73-year-old Francesco Villi, who was killed by the police in the hallway on the 3rd floor of the building. Some of the building's residents claims that Villi has been involved in a disagreement with the condominium's board of directors. Court documents also show that Villi sued 6 directors and officers of the condominium board in 2020, alleging that the directors had deliberately caused him 5 years of torment and torture with reference to an electrical room beneath his apartment. He sought a total of $8.1 million in damages, and the judge struck the case without leave to amend in 2022, ruling that it was frivolous and or vexatious. He also gave Villi 30 days to pay $2,500 in court costs. The condominium's board had obtained a restraining order against him in 2018, and he was due to return on court on December 19th as the board sought to have him evicted for being a nuisance. In response to the shooting incident, Villi's 3 estranged daughters issued a statement expressing their condolences and their shock and heartbreak at what happened. They described their father as having an aggressive Jekyll and Hyde type personality. Now, as of December 28th, 2022, and let's just go on the record here. Gun violence is not the solution. Shooting people is completely wrong. Harming any individual is wrong and definitely not endorsed at all. Violence is never the first option. So let's move on. Again, December 28th, 2022. This is another Communist Broadcasting Corporation article. Man and woman charged with first-degree murder in shooting of OPP officer near Brantford. Yes, we'll go back and say all these bans are here to prevent gun violence. Constable Gregors Piers Chalala learned Tuesday he had passed probation under the ultimate sacrifice. Two people accused of killing provincial police officer near Brantford, Ontario, were formally charged Wednesday with first-degree murder a day after the shooting. Randall Mackenzie, 25, and Brandy Stewart Sperry, 30, who have been in custody since their arrest, appeared at the Ontario Court of Justice in Cayuga via video link and are scheduled for their next hearing on January 17th. The Ontario provincial police officer who was fatally shot while responding to a call on Tuesday was essentially ambushed, said OPP Commissioner Thomas Carrick in a news conference. Police said 28-year-old Constable Gregors Pierce Jalala responded to a call for a vehicle in a ditch just west of Hagersville, Ontario, on Tuesday afternoon and was shot dead when he got there. Carrick said that the officer was at the scene for a very short period of time and stood absolutely no chance of being able to defend himself. He said the ongoing police investigation into the shooting is examining the motive and circumstances behind it. The commissioner alleges the suspects robbed a citizen of their vehicle at the scene after the officer was shot. The constable was killed the same day he learned that he passed his 10-month probation period and was granted the ability to patrol independently, according to the commissioner. Before that, the police officer served in the Canadian Armed Forces. This is a man who at 5 years old decided he wanted to be a police officer. He had a brief opportunity to live out his dream. Unfortunately, he paid the ultimate sacrifice. The commissioner said that the officer was patrolling independently at the time, and he was tragically killed. The officer was previously a special constable at Queen's Park and had been with the provincial police force for just over a year. Now, to talk about the suspect here, Mackenzie, the Indian, had been prohibited for a life sentence in 2018 for possessing any firearm, said the commissioner. He also said that Mackenzie was charged in 2021 with several firearm-related offenses and assaulting a peace officer. Mackenzie was later released on bail on a number of conditions, which included to remain in his residence and not to possess any firearms, amongst other restrictive conditions, said the commissioner. Mackenzie failed to appear in court in a response to those charges on September 6, and a warrant was then issued for his arrest, and additional criminal charges were laid against Mackenzie. The relationship between Stuart Sperry and Mackenzie has not been publicly confirmed. Now, the reservation where these Indians live on is a very small community, and everybody knows everybody on this small community. And what's shocking here is that you have an individual like this, and you have the reservation police officers not doing anything about this, letting this guy go on his way. So we have a dangerous person in the community, and everybody turns a blind eye to this guy. But it's okay, because he can't own a gun. The law says he can't own a gun. So he can't go into a store and buy one legally. He can't walk into a hunting shop and say, I want to buy a rifle and own one. He can't do that. But what he can do is he can get a gun on the black market. And these are where the laws of the Liberal government, or the policies of the Liberal government, fails to do anything, because they're not very tough on crime. So they allow these gun dealers to run wild and sell guns and have these small prison sentences, maybe 3 to 5 years. And if you're lucky enough, due to the backlog, you get double your time for time served. So before your trial. So you might sit in jail for a year, and then you have your trial, maybe, let's say, another year after that. So you say 2 years in prison, and then you get to your trial, and now you have 3 years. Well, you get double time. So you've already done 2 years, which is equivalent of 4 years. So you go to trial, and there you go. You're out on the street, and you can go and deal more guns again. So the justice system in Canada is fundamentally broken. You need to keep these people off the street, so you need to do a better job of preventing these guns to get in. But then you have these dangerous people, such as this Mackenzie, hidden amongst his community, and nobody seems to really care. In a written statement to the Canadian press, Mackenzie's family expressed their condolences to the officer's family. "We wish them healing and peace," the statement said. They said Mackenzie had some challenges growing up, got into the wrong crowd in high school, and began abusing drugs at a young age. This is a story that you hear time and time again from the Indian community. Everyone is having a difficult time processing and is extremely hurt. This community, and I've had the opportunity to visit the reservation up in Hagersville and Oswego, and been in the town and talked to many people. This is a town just outside of Brantford, Ontario, which is a modern town. And then you get into Oswego, and the majority of people still have to go down to the city center and fill up their own water buckets because they have a water treatment plant, but they have no one to operate the water treatment plant. There's no value on education. Most of the people end up dropping out of school, and the community doesn't want to further educate these people. And I use the term "these people" in reference to the Indians that are living on the land. What needs to be done in that community is get a sense of community, a sense of getting together, and to have a good school system that keeps these kids in school engaged and learning, not having it be acceptable, and knowing that parents, and knowing that your kid is hanging out with the wrong people. He's 25 years old. Remember, he's 25 years old, and he was in high school. So they're saying they got into the wrong crowd in high school. At 25 years old, and you're in high school, and you're formative teens, and by 18 you're out of high school. So let's say at 16 years old, the parents knew that he was hanging out with a bunch of idiots, and that he was abusing drugs at a young age. But what did the parents do? Absolutely nothing. They put their hands up and they said, "That's not our problem. It's okay. We love you, son. You can continue to hang out with those people, and you can continue to do drugs. And it's okay." That's not okay. That's not okay. That's poor parenting. And it's a poor community where there's no social support. But the Liberals' goals, remember, is to end gun violence. And do you see where the problem is here? The Liberals, who are in control of federal money, and the federal money goes down to these reservations, and the reservations aren't spending their money in the way that it should be spent in helping their people. It's not being done. You have the government turning a blind eye to that and saying, "It's okay, we sent you the money, you'll fix the problem." And then they can come election time and say, "Well, we put all these great policies into place to prevent people from getting guns, and we're stopping gun violence by doing this." But they're not addressing the one thing. Criminals do not care about laws. I'd like to thank you for tuning in today to this edition of The Fact Is. As always, feel free to reach out to us on Facebook, on Twitter. We love to hear your input. Until then, you've been listening to The Fact Is. I'm your host, Hollis Grant. You have yourself a great week.
Dun, 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 dun. Salsa shark! We're gonna need a bigger boat!
Throughout history, they have been a part of our Canadian life. Men and women who have made their mission to entertain their fellow man. They've worked hard enough. Isn't it time they had their own podcast?
Right, it's Canada. This podcast would be great if it wasn't for the internet trolls.
I don't bother them and they don't bother me.
I could do without the bad reviews in the iTunes store. Do you have that podcast with that guy who was at that Comic-Con in the last year?
You should hear the barrage of the stupid questions I get on our SoundCloud account.
What do you mean there was coughing? How am I going to hear a podcast with coughing?
You feel a lot better if you just rip into the occasional guest.
You're a host who doesn't get paid. You can't just do anything you want while you're recording.
What kind of podcast are you running here anyways?
Droids Canada Podcast present.
You think anyone can see us down here?
Why, you think you want to have sex or something?
Can we?
Droids Canada Podcast. The only show to rip off a Clerks trailer.
You hate people!
But I love Comic-Cons. Isn't it ironic?